present state of the speech. And actually, when we talk about speech or something, this is a basic thing that we remember. This is what the other people mentioned about basically the US family types, where when a speech is to be made at some presentation, all they do is pick up a glass and take it into this. So sorry, we don't have the classes to present that to you.
So we were asked to give a metaphor for speech, but what we did was we gave something else which is for which speech is here is the actual content.
So this is what we define speech as. Speech is a battle of time for hearts and minds. In other words, it's all about gaining power. So what I wanted to discuss here about this metaphor was how speech was used very persuasively in gaining hearts and of various people in the history of the mankind. First, when we come back into the dark ages, there were the war generals where people had to give up their lives and even though fight battles when they knew that they were going to lose it. This was a time when war generals gave up various powerful speeches, to be precise, to motivate them to even give up their minds so as to for the welfare of their countries as such. So this tells us the emotion and the power that is attached to the speech as it is. And then when we come back to the recent ages, we talk about Swami Vivekananda and Adolf Hitler as well. Swami Vivekananda is known for his famous speech in Chicago, where he delivered the starting speech saying that dear brothers and sisters of America. So this word resonated so much in the entire auditorium that even though his speech had to be presented within the 5 minutes, the entire people were clapping for just those words for the entire 5 minutes. This shows the power of speech, of how people can be effective, how they can communicate with others. I feel that speech is the only power that is given to the human being and which defines a human being as a whole, because there is no other animal in the entire earth which can have this thing, and many people can disapprove, but I feel so. And since I feel a speech is the only way where you can communicate with others, show them what you think of, show them your emotions. So then coming back to the Adolf Hitler, where we can showcase about the emotions, he turned an entire country into something which is more devastating at that moment. He built up a world war. He made wars between the nations by just speech. He was just about 5'4", I guess, or maybe little than that, but to have that much of control over the entire world means a lot. So this is what the power of speech that we can showcase when we talk about this. And the last thing when we talk about is the TED Talks and the recent times. I hope everyone has heard at least a single TED Talk here. So the greatest thing about the TED Talk is that it takes up the people who have gone through the hardships and try to persuade others to focus on that issues. The basic emotional link between in a TED Talk is a speech, where great people come there on the stage, deliver their emotions, deliver their hardships through a simple matter of words, so that every other people can understand what they are doing and what hardships they went through, so that they can understand how things are done right now. So that is why we given the name, the speech is a battle of hearts and minds. So coming back to that, next thing Vinay is going to take.
So here we are going to, okay, so this is one other code.
Yeah, actually these are a few examples. These are a few quotes from famous people right here about the speech. Chanakya, as you know, the greatest strategist ever known in the world, and next Buddha, the peace giver of the entire world. These things mention us. Actually, these two people are quite in contrast with each other. But when you see that they know the emphasis of the speech and they put out it in such beautiful terms, saying that speech is a grain that can pass through a sieve which can put you into any sort of, which can push you through any sort of means, and that would be it.
Yeah. So in our case, we'll take up the case of Roman Empire and study how they use speech to run the empire. So Roman Empire, as we know, was not a large empire like most of the empires. So it was an empire of cities. Each city was called a republic. So what does republic mean according to them? What they thought was it was ruled by representatives of people, not elected by people that becomes democracy. They were representatives of people and there were no monarchs. So that was the definition of republic. So what did this give? What did this do to the people? So people had a notion that somebody who's representing us is ruling us. Okay, and how were these people chosen? They were just chosen from the wealthy class and the rich class. And what did they do to run the what did they do to convince people that they are doing good to them? Because of their speeches. They used to gather in public, make amazing speeches, and this was the only thing which ran the Roman Empire. Okay, so if I take it to one level above, I can say that speech is more of an art. It's not just an act. Okay, so how can I mix art and speech? Speech is not only what I speak to the audience, it's also about what I speak to myself. First I speak to myself, what will audience like, what will they not. Then I put out words which I try to convince through. So that's where speech becomes an art, and that's where the art was used to run a nation. So there was, and I just draw how the structure was. So as I explained, the people, okay, by the way, in Roman Empire, only the elites were allowed to gather in public. They were only allowed to give public speeches. The common people are not allowed to give public speeches. So if I say the owners were actually the elite classes, in those days they were the senates, and what was the workers were the common public, and it was the speeches or the gatherings. So what was the superstructure about? So the whole state was, okay, there was the ruler, but the senates and the magistrates controlled the rulers. I mean, they were the advisors. So I would say the state were the senates and magistrate, and your class and in fact the whole citizenship was defined by your birth. And there were some slaves who were freed by the Romans, but even their class has been decided by the fact that there were slaves who were freed. So after that comes your language, which was the tool for your speech. So language was kind of owned by the state. Language was the tool and it was owned by the state. So there was one particular language which connected the people. So initially only Romans had access to this, not the entire Italian peninsular people, and then slowly as age passed, the people from Pisa to Sicily were included in this structure. So this particular tool is what they use to access the public, and this was kind of the link between the public and the elites. And so I think that was self-explanatory in saying that only the elite. Okay, and trying to connect with the metaphors used by Praveen. So speech was again, it was kind of connected to leaders and visionaries, and who had this, the elites, and who believed it, the public. So they were always kind of had a fetish for these people who had access to speak. But if you think back, what is exactly speech? It started as just a basic form of communication. So it was human way of just communicating. But slowly over time it evolved into something which is more powerful, which was directly another word for power. And what was the ideology which was developed over it? So before that, what is exactly an ideology? The way I see it is just a superstructural system which was created by the ruling class. And what does it do? It conceals the actual relations of individuals and classes to the means of production. Okay, so if we try to correlate here, the whole concept of speeches, which gave a wrong or blind notion of the elites taking care of the public. So in a way, actually, that concealed the relation. What was the actual relation? They were just exploiting. They were just taking care of themselves. They made sure the common public remained remaining where they are. Okay, so in modern sense, if you take it, this Roman Empire evolved, it became a modern democracy where everyone can speak, everyone can represent people. So that is where we are doing a case analysis of a contemporary course. Yeah, this I have covered. So a city governed by deeply entrenched wealthy class with power in the hands of a few, but what bound the people and kept the republic running? Just act of public speech. So,
first of all, I don't think in present tech-savvy world we really need speech that. If you really want, in our managerial perspective, in our day-to-day work, you can just email what you want to do, or you can use other modes of communication, text or whatever it is, right? So if you want to tell your boss, okay, I've done something, and this is what I think you should go forward, you can always email, you can always text. Why do we have to speak to person? I mean, why would you always prefer having the person in front of you in order to convince him to do something instead of just, give it in a third person point of view, maybe an email or something like that. So, in order to explain that, I'm just going to take an example of, I'm going to use one of the TV shows, it's possibly good. To give you the basic framework of how this TV show works, the guy on my right is Alan Shaw. He's a liberal, he's a loudmouth, he gives lengthy speeches and he tries to convince people of something that is not actually there, right? And he works with the fat guy over there. He's Denny Gray. He's a Republican, hardcore Republican. He's a conservative, and he was a hell of a lawyer back in his day. But as of now, he's suffering from Alzheimer's and he's on a declining. So the entire show, how it works is these two have conflicting opinions, yet they are best friends. They keep on arguing about everyday stuff, that maybe even political stuff. They talk about stuff that's related to abortion. They talk about stuff like patriotic act or the war, the big pharma, big tobacco, whatnot, right? But the writers have essentially used this show as a form to deliver the content that their political views. At least that's the way I looked at whenever I watched the show, right? But since they are lawyers, let's talk about law for a moment. Okay, so for us, law is something that's without bias. Law is objective. Law is emotionless. That's what we look at law as. But every episode of this show makes it seem that your opinion is wrong. Law is not at all objective. Law is completely subjective. Law is all about convincing the jury. Law is all about putting your idea forward. Law is all about how loud you are and how you are able to convince other people. Right? So, now where am I going forward with this? This all sounds a lot of globe and the TV show on the slide and everything, right? So, what I am trying to say is, no matter how ideal a situation you take, no matter how ideal a person you are sitting in front of, he is going to have his biases regarding any issue. He might not know about the issue. He might be hearing about the issue for the first time, but he have a bias. How are you going to convince him? You also have your own biases, right? So when you start talking, you get emotional. What's the role of emotion in speech? You're supposed to be emotionless, you're supposed to be objective. But that's impossible. So the content or the idea that you're trying to put forward is the content, fine. But what's the form? The form is the emotion. So what I'm trying to say is, nothing, emotion can't serve without the content. Whereas the content won't be able to, you won't be able to deliver your content if you're not emotional about it. Right? So the emotion is the form and the content is the idea that you're trying to put forward. So regarding, form and content dichotomy of speech, I think this is what I have to say about it. And I'd like to end by saying the louder and the more emotional the more emotional you are about something, the farther you will be heard. More people will be convinced about what you are trying to say. Take the examples of great leaders, take the examples of bad leaders, take the example of any leader. Take Hitler for example. How did he how did he make World War II happen? He convinced people. Obviously, if you think about it now, if you think about it objectively, why would you want a world war? Obviously, you won't be able to, you think about it like, okay, why the hell? I won't agree to what you're saying. I don't want to go to war with all the nations that are around me. But how was he able to convince you? Right? It's about that emotion that he was able to portray. It's about that anger that he had towards that particular religion or whatever it is. That he convinced people. That we are the elite, we are Aryans, whatever. Right?
I'd like to add one more point to this. Regarding the recent Mumbai attacks that had happened, there were just around 10 people or so who travelled through a tough path entering into India, knowing that they are not going to survive once they are here, knowing that they will be killed. So losing yourself or losing your life for the sake of something cannot be done that easily, because that is the greatest pain known to any person right now. And speech has that power to overcome that. When you hear provocative talks of religious activists, you can find that in YouTube. So they are so powerful and they are so convincing that in 15 minutes, all you want to do is, if they have a toll-free number there, you just pick up the phone and dial up and join up in those groups. So that is the power of the speech that they deliver. They so beautifully relate what a religion is and how you should die, and after you die a certain death, how you are going to be in heaven. There is something called as a word called jihad, which is called a pure war, and they try to extrapolate that word in such a great fashion that if you die in that, you are going to get everything in the afterworld. Okay? Since you don't have anything in this world, they are creating aspirations for something that you don't have right now in the next world. So what better than that?
So we spoke about, we began by saying a few metaphors, that we went back to Roman stuff, and then we were talking about Boston analytics, we came back to jihad. So what was common here? If you observe, even in contemporary time, even in the so-called modern technological time, even in case of examples of jihad and Nazis, speech was done by one class and it was listened by other class. What did they do? They used this particular mode of production for their excess. So that's what is the power of speech.
So if you look at it, even in the present day's world, speech is an art. Speech is something like you acquire after you have a certain amount of education or whatever it is, and that is not provided for everybody. So the class system exists even now, and the framework is still relevant. I mean, like, although we did that framework using Romans in mind, but I think it's still relevant.